I'm on now. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us this evening. On the way over, I was thinking of some nice things to say about Krishna and how we could revive our dormant love for Krishna. And I brought with me one thing that when I was talking to Mahatma, which I think next week will be my last week, and then Mahatma should be back. And he mentioned that he liked this one that I had told him about some time ago, called Fly Your Own Plane. So I thought we could review that and see what you think of that. Got a couple verses from the Bhagavad Gita I was going to start with. In chapter 4, text 15, it says, "All the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, you should perform your duty following in their footsteps." So, we're following in the footsteps of the great acharyas in the past, out of the special mercy of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, like that. So we're actually following in their footsteps. And then I was thinking in chapter 13, text 13, "I shall now explain to you the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, that lies beyond the cause and effect of this world." And just in my own situation, I've been thinking lately about the word relish. It's a very interesting word that gets used a lot in our wording. And in this purport it says, "The Lord has explained the field of activities," which is the body, "the knower of the field, the soul, and the supersoul. He has also explained the process of knowing the knower of the field of activities. Now he begins to explain the knowable. First the soul, then the supersoul. By knowledge of the knower, both the soul and the supersoul, one can relish the nectar of life." So I was thinking, what a wonderful thing to read, how we can relish the nectar of life. It's wonderful. You don't ever hear that anyplace else. Everybody's, work hard, make money, buy things. Here they're saying, just by this knowledge, you'll be able to relish the nectar of life. So what I was thinking about today, I'll connect this into our class that we're talking about, is just like there's understanding and then there's realization. So there's something that changes between knowledge and understanding, or just knowing something and realizing it. And then I noticed it doesn't really stop there. There's another item that happens after realization called relish. So that same element that changes understanding into realization also continues. So I was starting to think about what are the elements that make up this relish. But that maybe we'll do that one next week. For this week, because it is quite fascinating how one can be situated in this relish. Basically, a little clue on it, I guess, is it's the interaction of the internal potency with the living entity. At first, he just understands it, but then he starts to perform those activities. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, it's all about doing something different than what you're used to doing, and having it substantiated by perfect philosophy. When I think about philosophy, I think about philosophy as being like the hub of a wheel with many spokes. And the idea is with philosophy, there's one point, and everything's related to that point. Material philosophy is enjoying your senses. And so people come up with how everything is either good or bad for your senses. But in Krishna consciousness, it's what's pleasing to Krishna. We have a service attitude to please Krishna. And when Krishna is pleased, we're pleased. There's a bit of a mystery behind that. that gets revealed to us because we're part and parcel of Krishna. But what I was going to do, to fly your own plane, basically, the idea behind flying your own plane is, originally I had pictured that you were in, let's say, a fighter plane with many, many gauges. You've seen the cockpits of a plane that has a whole lot of gauges. Like your car has maybe 4 or 5. You have your speedometer, your temperature gauge, your fuel gauge, oil pressure, battery, like that. But in a plane, there's many, many more gauges. So what I thought would be interesting to do is use that for an analogy. So you can gauge your advancement on these points. So Prabhupada has also mentioned that in Bhagavad Gita. I think that's chapter 13, 8 to 12. He says one can gauge himself by these points. I guess I could check that and see. This was originally going to be set up for a seminar where it was a workshop where you could participate. It's a little bit harder to do it like this because of the participation is different. But so the first part of it, I don't know if anybody remembers, we had done an ideal developed on a piece of paper called Choice, Om. We had 3 columns. We had fruitive activities and we had devotional service. And we had different synonyms or the characteristics of fruitive activities. Like, it's based on empirical information coming through the senses. Because with fruitive activities, one gets his knowledge through the senses, and he tries to satisfy the body. And he identifies that as happiness, and he works very hard for that. So, in fruitive activities, another name for that is called karma. It's the ascending process of trying to understand something you figured out on your own. It's temporary, mundane. It has the statement that it's our conditioned life is another synonym for fruitive activities. It binds us up. There's fear. There's an acronym for fear. Remember I mentioned one time it's fear is what was it? False evidence appearing real. So in this material world, when we see something through our senses, it's incomplete understanding. So there's fear there. It's controlled by the modes of nature. It's based on sense gratification. It's not for the benefit of Krishna. There's pride. It's the external potency. Another synonym for fruitive activities is generally it's sinful activities. It's an illusion, has the 4 defects, speculative, the idea that I am the enjoyer, to have a tendency to blame others. It's always being disturbed, called the bodily conception of life. So that was some of the synonyms we had for the external potency. And then for the internal potency, we had that it was transcendental, beyond the senses, victorious, satisfying, absolute. They're called the bhaktas. It's the descending process of getting knowledge from Krishna. It's divine, eternal. It's our constitutional position. As the eternal servants of Krishna, free from anxiety, free from the modes, happiness that comes from serving Krishna. There's humility. There's perfect knowledge. There's love. There's perfect relationships. satisfies the soul. It's called self-realized. It's very simple. Yoga, Maya, sometimes compared to soothing moonshine. The mind is steady, happiness, peace, fixed consciousness, and regulated. So, and then there was the one in the middle, which was our choice of going between one of these or the others. So, I had conceived of this as a functional definition we could use for Om. Because Om looks like a 3, and this is 3 columns. And it would fit very well into most situations where you're seeing that every place where they use Om, practically, it's to point out you to remember these distinctions between the external energy, the internal energy, and your choice. This is the position of the living entity. We're called the marginal potency, Jiva, the marginal potency, Tatashta Shakti. So in every situation, the main event is how you're going to make your choice. If you're going to choose to serve Krishna and pick that divine, eternal, blissful condition, or subtly you desire to engage in fruitive activities, unsatisfying, sinful, fallen, conditioned, false ego, bondage, fear, controlled by the modes, sense gratification, bodily conception of life, like that. So once you spend a little time and you understand this thoroughly, you get what is called a light inside. You could call it a divine light inside. And you get to put this in front of everything you do. So when you have that light now, we're going to use that light for the control panel light, for these gauges in flying your own plane. See if everybody followed that. We'll fly your own plane. Prabhupada would use that example to indicate that everybody is responsible for the self. He's, or she, he said someone can tell you, give you an instruction over the radio, but you're in control of your own plane. So as this life, we're controlling our own destiny by how we're flying the plane. So I thought it would be nice to, if we're using this light from being able to tell fruitive activities from devotional service, we could set up some gauges. And I'll give you an idea, like one that we're thinking about here is, how about your temperature gauge? Like even in your car you have a temperature gauge. So what do you think we could make that analogy to? What burns like fire in this world? Alright. Figure everybody got it by now. Is material desire, generally called lust. So there's a certain very good. So we have that gauge. So in the gauge, just like the one in your car, it has a little red spot. It says if you go too hot here, you're going to blow your head gasket and ruin your motor. So if it starts to go up to a certain point, you need to pay attention, pull over, check your water, and like that. Make sure your fan belt's working, your water pump's working. So in flying your own plane, we have these different gauges. So one of the gauge, yes, is this desire, and there's a range that's all right. It's not that you make it 0. It's just that it's controlled and it's all right. Now, how about let's take a compass. There's another gauge that they have in airplanes, not so much in cars, but you want to see if you're on course. So if you're off course, you're not going to get to your destination. But let's think of another one that's a lot more fun than that. Is maybe everybody's familiar with this word, niyamagraha. Everybody know that word? That means you're more or less doing things mechanically. It doesn't have full consciousness of knowing what you're doing and what the effect is. So on this gauge, this is an analog gauge, the old kind with the needle that goes from one end to the other. So on one end of this gauge is Niyamagraha, and on the other side is Lalasamai. That word means intense eagerness. You're very excited about Krishna consciousness. And on the other side, you're just doing it mechanically. So we look at this gauge. When this analogy is thought out and built in your subtle body, or even if you write it up, then you can check yourself. Just like when you're flying your own plane, you always check the gauges. Do you have enough fuel? Do you have, how's your engine running? So there's lots and lots of gauges, especially in fighter planes. Like, for instance, how about your G-force? That's quite similar to the last one. The G-force is not how high you are. That's your altimeter. That's, in other words, like how high you are is the degree of Krishna consciousness you've already obtained. Like, for instance, there's a dos shraddha. In the beginning, there's a preliminary desire for Krishna consciousness, and that's a most wonderful thing that brings you into the association of devotees. So there's those 9 stages from the very beginning to prema. So that's more or less the speed that you're going. But your G-force is how you're anxious to advance, how you're using the situation. Because sometimes we find, resting on their laurels, that they've already have established some good habits, and then there's complacency can sit in, and you just kind of, the weeds can grow up, and you don't even notice, because you already know enough that you can talk about Krishna. You already know how to have a routine where you can chant your japa, but you're not feeling that fresh enthusiasm, and it's time to look at that. Like enthusiasm, that's another gauge. You look at your enthusiasm gauge, and you can see if is it all right. You know, there's a range in there, or if it's hitting the red line where your enthusiasm is dropping off. So what do? If you're flying your plane and your enthusiasm is dropping off, you're going to lose some of your elevation. You're going to lose some of your speed. And you're in dangerous condition. So he looks at his gauges and he sets up a backup plan, what to do. Just like we know, if you do have a car or a plane, when you have a problem, there has to be a plan on what to do. So this is another way of developing more introspection, of understanding how many things can we get attacked. Well, yes, there are attacks, and we do have ways to fend ourselves. In fact, it is a rather hostile environment. Generally, you fly in formation, where even though you're in your own plane, you have association around you, which gives you a lot of strength. Association is one of the foremost principles there is in devotional service, to have good association. In the Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami explains that there are 6 things that nourish our devotional service, and that's the 6 types of loving exchanges. So this comes from association. So then, even if there is some attack, because there's many kinds of attacks. There's attack from your own mind. There's attacks from people who you thought were going to be part of your support group. Just like in class, we're studying about Bali Maharaj. I'm supposed to give class on Thursday, so I'm thinking about this now. And here he is, his own spiritual master's giving him bad advice. So he had to fly his own plane. He had to discriminate on what to do. And you never know. Your most dear person can sometimes give you bad advice. And we see here Bali Maharaj's Sukracharya, his formal spiritual master. Actually, I think his real spiritual master was Prahlad Maharaj. If you got Prahlad Maharaj as your grandfather, you know you're going to be trained up really nice. So I'm sure he's been liberated long before, because there's our external situation and then there's our internal situation. So the external situation a lot of times doesn't need to be, there's no statement required. One can go on with his internal situation, and his external situation may never be called upon to demonstrate. But with Bali, it was. He got called out by Vamanadev. So even though you don't know what he was thinking, but especially a pure devotee, but we can see how he acts just now coming up with this chapter. Just started a new chapter today. No, tomorrow. We're starting a new chapter. Keshava ended the one today, and tomorrow, I think it's Mother Ruchira starts the new chapter. And we see how Bali is going to respond to these instructions of Sukracharya. So there's always how to defend yourself. In fact, that's another paper that I wrote called The Art of Self-Defense. I always like to make puns about these things because there's so much talks about the art of self-defense. But we find no matter how many black belts they got, every one of them loses the fight against time. And they all die. Every one of them died. Earlier or later, but they all die. So their art of self-defense was not good enough. But in Krishna consciousness, we have a real art of self-defense that one doesn't die. That's real defense against what the enemies are that are coming. And mostly they come through the undisciplined consciousness. We're not aware of what we have to do. So that was the idea of flying your own plane. So what I had written down here was, Srila Prabhupada has said that everyone is responsible for themselves by the statement that everyone must fly their own plane. No one from another plane can fly the plane for you. Srila Prabhupada has also told us that we can gauge our progress on a number of things. So I thought it would be wise to formulate a list of some of these items that and of those gauges as we could model for an analogy. Since ultimately we can never blame anyone else but ourselves, I thought it would be helpful for me to take full responsibility for myself and see what things I should look at. So I put, one of them is, how much are we consciously trying to please Srila Prabhupada? So you have a gauge like that and you say, well, I haven't thought about it. Or if you actually had a gauge, at one time I made they used to have these little brass things you'd push through paper and then you'd bend them out on the outsides, a way of holding papers together, and you could put a little analog needle on it, stick it through and make a practical model of that. And you could see, well, how much am I consciously trying to please Prabhupada? What about my service attitude? There's a gauge. Take a look at your service attitude. Is it healthy, or it's not that healthy, or haven't thought about it? So the idea behind making up all these gauges is just conscientiously think of all the things that we've been told, kind of a comprehensive way to put down and learn what are all the different things that we should become conscious of. And then if you do, it shows your interest, and then you can start to adjust every one of them, and your progress will go so fast. And the idea of making progress is that we have a relationship with Krishna. That was the basic theme of all these talks. And there's a satisfaction that takes place when one reciprocates with Krishna. That was the idea behind what's the difference between understanding and realization, is that Krishna is giving you the realization. Understanding, maybe your understanding, depending on your surrender, Krishna reciprocates. So you understand it, but maybe you haven't surrendered enough to do it. But then when you actually understand enough to do it, you do it a little like you put your toe in the water to see if it's cold, as opposed to jumping in. So when you have that full enthusiasm and full surrender, it's very pleasing. And then you start to notice that Krishna is reciprocating. And that's what it's all about, to experience that. And that's where it goes from realization to relish. Every moment is relishable. So we're trying to not slow down, overcome. Like another gauge is your doubt gauge. Is the doubt gauge on the rise or going down? You can chart it. So I had service attitude. How's our hearing and chanting and reading? In fact, I just read today, it was the end of chapter 25 of Madhya Lila. Prabhupada wrote a really heavy purport. He was saying, it was Lord Chaitanya was talking about the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then Prabhupada says, if anybody doesn't read all the books that have been translated, the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar Devotion, like that, he says, but he'll simply eat, sleep, and fall down. That's right. So you have to make sure you're getting your daily quota of hearing, chanting, and reading. You have to make a systematic study. It's not a casual read. This is a life and death situation. I was talking to somebody the other day about sadhana, and first I stated it in a positive way. If you come to sadhana, I said, do you think it would please Prabhupada if you did your sadhana? I said, yes. He says, how about, do you think, if you're pleasing Prabhupada, it's pleasing Krishna, do you think it would help you advance if you had sadhana, or if you didn't have sadhana, would it make any difference for advancement? And generally that's kind of one of those kind of questions that it's hard to answer anything other than what being asked. So person said, yeah, I probably would advance if I had better sadhana. So then I said, so what's advancement mean? Advancement towards what? And gradually we got to the point that advancement means feeling pure love for Krishna. Prema Pumarta Mahan. That's where we're advancing towards. So we went on like that for a little while, and it seemed very, very nice to hear those things. I said, well, let's just say the same thing in a negative way instead of the positive way. So instead of showing Krishna that you're interested in advancing, you show him that you're not interested. That even though I know this would help me advance, I'm not going to do it for one reason or another. So I don't care if it helps me advance, and I don't care if I don't please Prabhupada as much, I don't please Krishna as much, and I don't develop love for Krishna. So when you stated it in a negative way, it really sounded harsh. Much better to say it in a positive way. Oh, this will help me do this, and it'll help me please Krishna and Prabhupada, and help me advance, and advancing is getting towards love of God. As opposed to saying it the other way, that I'm actually showing him that I'm not that interested. So the same way, we should, think about this reading and take it serious, because anything you take, this is so personal, because Krishna is in your heart, the Chaita Guru. He sends you Prabhupada, he sends you Prabhupada's books, which are him talking to you directly without getting confused. Is this Krishna? Is this Maya? Here's straight, pure devotional service, the external manifestation of the Super Soul. And if you have no interest in it, then why keep it? Just like, for instance, suppose someone came and gave you a check for $1 million, and you said, I'm busy, just put it over there on the shelf. Then you came, it's in the envelope. He comes back a couple days later and he said, did you open up the envelope, see what was in it? And he said, no, I've been busy, I haven't looked in the envelope, and it's getting dust on it. I said, no, it's something very good. You should look in there. You'd be happy. You take care of a lot of your problems. And he said, nah, I'll get it. I'll get it this week. Don't bother me so much. I'll get it. You keep coming by. So then you come by another 2-3 weeks later, and you said, well, what you think of that, huh? It's pretty nice. He says, you again? He says, I told you I'd look at it when I have some time. So he said, well, I won't bother you anymore. I'll just take it back. So these books and this sadhana, one has to be attentive to what's being offered here. And Krishna is sensitive to that. In other words, here he's giving you the opportunity to finish up all problems, everything, birth, death, old age, and disease, all kinds of miseries from the mind and the body and other living entities and nature. And right now it's too cold. So you finish all that stuff up. And I'm kind of busy now. I don't know if I have time to consider any of that. And after a couple times you think, well, why keep offering it if you're not interested? It doesn't want to bother you. So, all right, I'll come back later, and then the opportunity can just kind of fade away, and as opposed to taking the full opportunity to take full advantage of it. So that was our gauge. We take a look at the gauge. How much am I reading? Can I increase? Because a little bit of how Maya works. She's very clever, so she doesn't just say, just give it up. She says, just give me 1 minute more today. That's all. I'm not asking for a lot. Just 1 more minute. That 1 less minute for Krishna and Prabhupada and devotional service, and 1 more minute. That's all. Not much. Just 1 minute. You can spare a minute, right? So Maya works like that. And then she says, well, you can advance just as well at home as you can at the temple. You don't really have to go. Plus, there's probably a lot of people getting sick nowadays, so there'll be a germ pool, and you really can't afford to get sick, and it's kind of cold now. And she gives you another reason, and then you forget. So expertly, this from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So Krishna is seeing how you're listening to this. So this idea of flying your own plane, getting these lists together, is to bring us back to consciousness. This mode of goodness is consciousness, a little introspection, where we can see these distinctions and we can take advantage of the opportunity and not get forgetful of what's going on. So, so here we are with some more gauges. Transparent, or we motivate. Is there motivation, or are we instrumental to the super soul? So we want to try to just deliver the message unchanged that Krishna and Prabhupada are giving us. So that's another one of the gauges to just look at, because it's something like if we're not transparent, then it's like pride is getting in there, and we're putting more of ourself in there than Krishna, and we won't feel that. Tapa, how is our tapasya? Are we voluntarily undergoing some inconvenience for our spiritual life? There's a certain amount of tapasya, not that much, but we should see if we have that. Like even on Ekadasi, that's a nice day for doing a little austerity. So just do a little bit more, just a little bit, just to increase that. It's good for you. And faith. How's my faith? Is it increasing? Is it becoming first class? Is it second class or third class? So we have that gauge. If we just take a look at it, just to review it once in a while, otherwise we won't even think about it. We just, things go on unnoticed. So the idea behind making this chart up of flying your own plane is so we can just look at these things and become aware of all these. And in fact, how you make up one of these is we already have this. I was thinking the other day, and a thought came through my mind, and I noticed my intelligence came out to consider if this thought should be thought about for a while or dismissed right away. We have our thinking, feeling, and willing. And I noticed when my intelligence came out to look at the thought in my mind, it came out with bhakti in it. I was saying, oh look, bhakti is in my intelligence, and it's giving me the discriminating power to, should I accept this or reject it? So all these points are, we already have them. It's just bringing them a little bit more to the surface. So the next one was sadhana, enthusiasm, and that same idea that we're doing this with a service attitude. When we go see the deities, it's for their pleasure. And I had a wonderful example I could use for this. That my daughter, I have a 30-year-old daughter, and she lives in Los Angeles. We're in Alachua, so we don't see her very much anymore. So on Mother's Day, I think it was, she flew in without telling anybody, and she went to where my wife was resting and jumped on top of her. That was quite a surprise. So she wakes up, and there she was, her daughter she hadn't seen for a couple years, and she was so happy to see her. And what a surprise that was, because you never expect somebody to show up like that. So when we come to see the deities are glad to see us. Of course we're going to see them, but they're seeing us, and that we've come to see them. Oh, you came to see me? Oh, you brought me something? In the Nectar Devotion it mentions that when you go see the deities, there's usually a basket in front of the altar, and you can bring some piece of fruit, some incense, something to give an offering. So you went to see them, you bring them a gift, and they're pleased. And what we're developing is the sense, another sense, our spiritual senses, that just like our material senses, we can sense material objects. So in our spiritual senses, we can sense Krishna. By trying to please Krishna, he reciprocates, and you develop that sense of Krishna consciousness. So that in that sadhana, you go to see Krishna, and then are you happy to see him? Sometimes I look around during the artik, and people are just standing there with no expression on their face. I'm here, So it's like, oh, all right. So you come to see me, and you just stand there. You're not chanting, you're not moving, you're not dancing. As opposed to someone comes and they're just so happy to see you, they're jumping for joy, dancing, they look nice. You dress up so you look nice and clean. You come there, and it's a relationship that's going on. And as your senses become developed, you're aware of what Krishna he's pleased by that. So, and then of course there's another gauge, is how's your remembering Krishna going? Is it increasing or is it decreasing? Because we know that in the Nectar of Instruction, text 8, there's 5 progressive stages of remembering Krishna. And we know that in sadhana, the main principle of sadhana is to always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So that also develops. And of course, thinking of Krishna, that's different too. There's a lot of different ways to think about Krishna, but if you heard one of my, it may have been when I was with Mahatma, we talked about not just thinking of Krishna, but caring about Krishna. Just like, for instance, I came home late one time from being out, about 5 hours late, and I didn't call. So when I got home, I could either use my mother or my wife for this. If I go back to when I was a child, maybe I'll use that, get me in less trouble. I said, my mom says, well, why didn't you call? You know, did you think of me? And I said, oh yeah, I always think of you, but you didn't think of me because you didn't call, and you know I'd be worried. So I said, oh, okay. So if I'm going to be late next time, I'll call. So when we say always thinking about Krishna, you have to be thinking about what Krishna likes and being responsible to that, just like I should call home because that's what they're thinking about. So if you're doing something and you're thinking about Krishna, you have to think about Krishna and caring about him as a person and what he likes. That's called anukulena in that famous verse from the Nectar Devotion about the definition of pure devotional service. So you can look at your remembering Krishna and thinking about Krishna and see if it's progressive. Are we just, all right, I'm chanting, that's thinking. Prabhupada said chanting is thinking. But are you thinking in a progressive way, that of trying to, in a personal way? Krishna consciousness is very personal. So it's not just mechanical. Okay, I'll say it, I'll hear it. Sometimes I talk to people who are trying to work on their japa, and they say, just listen. Say it and listen. That's all right, of course. However, because it's personal, it's not mechanical. There's a difference between those two. Mechanical is, okay, I'm doing it. But personal is, Prabhupada told us to remember that Krishna is a person. And you just treat him like a person. See how well it works. And then sensitive like that. So then another gauge is, what's the condition, like before we're talking about the condition of my desire. Is my desire getting purified, or am I still maintaining material desires even after understanding so many instructions on them? Because that's in the heart. Who else can deal with that but you? And then, of course, when you think about that, there's nice prayers like the Gopinath prayer. There's different ways that show that you're interested to purify your desire. It doesn't just go away automatically. It'd be nice. Of course, it does to some degree, but if you're a good sadhaka, because it says if you listen to Srimad Bhagavatam, Punya Shravanam Kirtanam, that's pious. And for one who's developed an urge to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna from within his heart will destroy all the material desires. So that goes back to the earlier one. What about your reading? What about the hearing? So they all work together. And one of the deadliest types of things that can happen is a type of complacency where you're not trying to make today better than before. Today should be the best day of your life. Every day you should be able to say that this is the best day of my life. I chanted the best. I've tried the hardest today. And if you just develop a habit like that, otherwise you say, well, next week I'll try, or last week was a better week for me, this week there's something else. But in each situation, that's what your desire and your intelligence and Krishna reciprocating, giving us instructions how to pray. Just like we understand if there's problems, everybody has problems, but we went over that before, that actually there aren't any problems. They're the challenge to apply Krishna consciousness there. And then as soon as you take up that challenge, it turns into a growth opportunity. Okay, now let me apply what I've learned. Just like, for instance, we know we're supposed to tolerate, but if there's nothing to tolerate, how will we ever practice? So Krishna will send us something for sure that we have to tolerate. So instead of getting upset, why I have to tolerate this, I think, oh, this is an opportunity to practice doing tolerance. Let me bring in all the different knowledge. This person is not really responsible. I have my own karma that's coming back to me, and this person is just being instrumental, or there's everyone's controlled by the modes of nature, so it's not really that person, hate to sin, not to sin. And you get to practice everything if you have that moment of introspection, or that moment, that's called goodness, mode of goodness, instead of just being swept away by the mode of passion and becoming all defensive, and then the mode of ignorance and going into another diatribe or attack against the situation. So then you can see in every situation there's not really any problems. There's just the challenge of applying Krishna consciousness, getting the growth opportunity. And then if you remember, there was two more things after that. Everybody remember those other two? Well, the other two were, it gets personal after that, because as soon as you remember Krishna and you're trying, he reciprocates with you and gives you that shelter, that moonshine, nita parakamala koti chandra shushitala, that you get the relief from that problem, and now you're feeling enthusiastic. So you would think that how nice it was that Krishna has arranged this. He gave me this opportunity, and he gave me the knowledge and the enthusiasm how to do this. And that's not ordinary. He's actually paying attention, and he has everything adjusted for me in a certain way. Just like, you know, the idea with Krishna having sidelong glances. So what's the idea behind a sidelong glance? For me, I've understood it like this, is that externally there's so many things going on in the room. There's Krishna, there's all the different events that are taking place, on the main external level. But then when he gives you a little glance, there's a communication that actually between you and me, we got something else going on besides all this other stuff that's going on. It's just between you and me. And that's the sidelong glance. You're special. So in the same way, one starts to think, because you remember Krishna and you're applying the knowledge that he's given you, so you're seeing that Krishna, you're actually adjusting all this, and it starts to turn into an emotion at that point, where you're connecting. You're seeing Krishna is personally doing something with you through either knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness, because the reciprocation you're asking for. And then it turns into called udipan, or udipana. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but that's one of the next door devotion words for stimulation, for increasing your emotional involvement with Krishna. That you're seeing how he reciprocates. So I asked somebody, actually my friend Bob Brew has a Sanskrit person he associates with, that's I asked him what, because there's Deepa, which is generally says a lamp, and udipana. So I was saying, is there a connection? What's the connection? Is there a verbal connection between the two? And he says, well, the deepa actually is not a lamp, it's a flame. Well, I could see how those two could be related, but generally the technical is it's a flame, and udipana is that which inflames. So back to romantic language is it inflames the heart. It gets you the latest flame, like that. So there isn't actually problems. It's just remembering Krishna, and that's one of our gauges to see how is my remembering Krishna. Is it progressive, or is it casual, or not so personal? Because everything that we're hearing and reading and chanting every day, it's all working together to have us conscious of Krishna and our relationship with Krishna, functioning on that relationship with Krishna, and seeing our progress. One should see that he's progressing, and if he's not progressing sufficiently, he should take the means to find out why and how. Just like if you're not feeling good, after a while you'll consult a doctor or somebody who's familiar with your condition. So that's one of the ideas flying your own plane, is that you set yourself up triggers or alerts that if it gets to a certain point, you should find out. And you remember what we were using for the light to see these gauges was the distinction between fruitive activities and devotional service. So there's an old saying, flying by the seat of your pants. That means you're not using any, your dome light, your dash light is out, you can't see your gauges. Sometimes that happens in your car, and you're not sure how fast you're going, which isn't generally a problem unless there's a policeman behind you, and then you're quite in anxiety. You don't know how much gas you have in your tank. You don't know what your temperature is. You don't know anything because the light went out. So for a while you may carry a flashlight or you'll get it fixed depending on yourself. But so the same way in devotional service, how much effective it would be if you took a little bit of time and just made some of these show that you had some interest in getting it exactly clear. Not everybody's like this, I'm sure, but if you just follow sadhana, everything works fine. But if it's hard nowadays, the number of people who follow sadhana is, well, I'm happy to report here it's going up almost every day. I've been noticing now that our japa period here has just increased more and more. I'm not sure exactly why, but there's over 35 people that are chanting in the temple room in the morning for our japa time, and practically speaking, nobody talks. Every once in a while somebody will say something, but everybody's sitting down or walking around Tulsi, and they're just having real serious japa. And people who have trying to chant japa on their own or different times, they've come to the temple and they said that it's so nice to see that. Says I saw this morning on the web. Many people, yeah. So it builds, and it's a wonderful thing. So, all right. Our last gauge was desire. Then our next one is, how about the sama platform? Am I becoming equal, and degrees of being free from duality? Now, that may be a technical word for a lot of, but if you do, I do little studies, use the database and Word documents, and I select it and copy and paste it into Word documents. So if you study duality, it's a very nice threshold to understand, because it says this non-dual substance is known as Brahman, Paramatman, Bhagavan. And the duality is generally experienced as hot and cold, right and wrong, good or bad. But what the actual duality is matter and spirit, where there's actually only spirit. But when we're in our conditioned life, on the side of the page it's called fruitive activities, we see everything in relationship to the body and the senses, and there's always that duality and the fear. So that's a nice gauge to have, to see, to think about how to become free from that duality. And then, of course, just how about your awareness? Bhagavad Gita, there's 5 main topics that Prabhupada lists in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. He says that one should understand the position of Krishna, the living entity, that's 2, eternal time, and material nature, and karma. He says out of those 5, 4 of them are eternal, and 1 of them is temporary. So the vision will increase where one can see that. He sees there's Krishna and a living entity. They're combined together as friends, and the karma is the temporary situation that's there. But he sees them separate. So that's an awareness that we should be developing. And then there's also, how about our sacrifice? Be happy by sacrifice. So what to do? Oh, thank you. Let's see what that was, a clock. Yeah. So what to do about the sacrifice? We know the sacrifice for this age is chanting Hare Krishna, the Param Vijayate, Sri Krishna Sankirtan. So are you going out on Sankirtan? Or some chanting in front of the deities with the other devotees, the congregation? That's sacrifice for Krishna. It's recommended, and the result is there. And then, of course, there's surrender. There's the 6 items: accepting, rejecting, things that are unfavorable, depending on Krishna, feeling his protection, having no separate interest, and being humble. That's from text 100 of Madhya Lila, chapter 22. Something good to study. So we got a lot of gauge. Then there's preaching, association, realization, austerity, offenses, the quality of my rounds. There's a Shreya and Preya, submission to Krishna. I wrote this a long time ago. I'm looking at it. I have concentration, snorkel or scuba. That's what I wrote down. So when you're in the ocean of thinking about Krishna, like in your chanting of your japa, do you go down a little bit into the thick part of the water, but do you just pop right back up again? You can't stay down very long before your mind gets disturbed again. Or can you stay down longer with that scuba? And of course, how absorbed you are during your prayer. So these are a couple of the things that it's nice to put together as flying your own plane. These are some of the gauges that would be on there to see. You can gauge your advancement by this, because it's only you. Nobody else is going to do it for you. This is the internal commitment that we have to make. And if we have the first part down, where we can discriminate between fruitive activities and devotional service, the bodily conception of life and the spiritual conception of life, use that for your light so you can see the gauges. If you don't have that light, how will you even be able to see your gauges? So these are some of the points that I wanted to express, and I think our time is just the 6 items of surrender in Madhya Lila 22, text 100. And they're accept those things that are favorable for devotional service, reject those things that are unfavorable for devotional service, always feel that you're dependent on Krishna's mercy, be exclusively dependent on Krishna, have no separate interest other than Krishna's interest, and always feel oneself meek and humble. So those are the 6 items. And of course, each one of those, I've particularly noticed that 3 and 4, how one depend on Krishna. You know, a lot of times we would defend ourselves. Somebody will accuse us of doing something. Maybe we did it, maybe we didn't, maybe they misunderstood, and we want to defend ourselves. But if you don't, you just kind of don't say anything for a moment, you can develop your character so much more. And that's a natural, because humility, Prabhupada gives one definition of it, Bhagavad Gita chapter 13 verse 8, is not being anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. So for me, I've kind of thought of it a little bit like chastity, where they compare chastity and the unchaste. It would be like a prostitute. A prostitute tries to please everybody, where someone who's chaste says, I only have to please one person. I'll be polite, but I know who I to please. So we want to please Krishna. We don't have to please our false ego. We don't have to please everybody who's expecting something from us. I call that the assumed context. Somebody comes up to you and they ask you, like, how are you doing? Are they referring to your body? Are they referring to your spiritual consciousness? Are they referring to your business? Are they referring to your household life? They could be meaning so many things, and you're supposed to figure it out right away on the spot and give them the right answer. Oh, fine, you know. But they come with a particular context. Depending on who's asking you, you know what the answer is. So if we just think about Krishna, we know that we don't have to go into all the assumed contexts that other people go to. We don't have to try to please people outside of pleasing Krishna. And sometimes people won't like that. Sometimes they will. They like to be thought of as the most special one. So there's a bit of humility that develops like that. And that's also recognized, so that nobody really holds it against you to be humble. That's their problem if they do. So I guess I'll see you again next week. And if you have any questions or things that you'd like me to review, it should be I think my last one. I'll see how it goes when Mahatma comes back. It's been a pleasure talking with everybody and not knowing exactly who's out there. It's been an experience talking to a 1-inch round glass. It's Kali Yuga, you know. But thank you for all the times you write in. Can you give any tips or advice for not becoming complacent and staying enthusiastic about chanting? Well, yeah, just association. There's if you ever had a manager or you've ever had to manage a business, there's a couple sayings that I always like from my business years. There's 2. One is that the time required to do something will expand to the time allotted. That if you say, I'll do it in a week, you'll do it in a week. If you say you'll do it in a month, you'll do it in a month. If you say, I'll do it when I get around to it, you'll never get around to it. And that's one. And the other one is, it's not what you expect, it's what you inspect. So it's good to have a team, somebody else that you're working with, that you can respond back and forth with the other person. Like, okay, this week let's do this. And you enthuse them, they enthuse you, and you work with somebody. That's very helpful, because we respond to that more than to do it on your own. It's possible, but it's much more difficult. And let's see about you. So remembering every day, everybody has different techniques that they've developed, But if you can have somebody that you can relate with and try to ask that, and they'll just tell them to check on you, or you check on them, and by doing that, you'll develop a whole bunch of enthusiasm. That's what I would recommend. And if you don't have somebody, then you have to do it for yourself by reading, say, quote, set yourself up a quota to read a certain amount, and maybe take notes on what you read, so you can. And then in the Bhagavatam 1:6, Prabhupada in the purport says that even better than reading is you tell somebody. So after you read it, you have to have somebody that you can tell what you read. It's not too hard to find, and that way it sticks, and you'll see as soon as you start talking about Krishna, you'll become more enthusiastic. He does that. I thank you very much. Hare Krishna. See you next week.